This is Psalm 23.
The Lord is my shepherd. He gives me everything I need. He lets me lie down on fields and green grass. He leads me beside quiet waters.
He gives me new strength.
He guides me in the right path. For the honor of his name. Even though I walk
through the valley of the shadow of death,
I'll not be afraid. You are with me. Your shepherd's rod and staff tempted me.
You prepare a feast for me.
Right in front of my enemies. You pour oil on my head. My cup runs over. I am sure your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. And I'll live in the house for Lord forever.
Thanks again for having me at your place. I've got a little bit of a disclaimer at the start of this address. Which this is not a particularly Bible-based message. We'll have a little bit of the Bible, but it's not it's not there. But I hope it's one that will really help us personally, and that it will help us to think about the ways in which we can support our friends and others in the church and outside the church. So over the last couple of decades, there's been a lot of study done on the subject of faith development in adult churchgoers, looking at how and why faith stays or changes across people's life. And one of the things that has been found is that faith goes through about 6 major transitions over the period of an average adult life. And I'd like to review those with you this morning. The material that I'm using is based on some prepared by Dr. John Savage in the US. He did a major work around how to strengthen people's connections to the local church. And he drew on material that's quite well known by James Fowler, who wrote a book about the stages of faith. And so the ages that I'll give to you today are generally true, but some people will experience them earlier or later, depending on life circumstances. But regardless of what age they happen, most of us will go through these 6 major life transitions. So first off, I should explain something about what a transition is. A transition has 3 stages. It has an end, it has a time of confusion, I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, and it has a new beginning. And also something else about transitions is that they are major emotional work. You cannot have a new beginning without an ending. And in order to have a new beginning, you have to say goodbye to the stuff that no longer works for you. So therefore, endings are often fraught with grief and anxiety, and that's normal. So the first stage that we're going to consider comes between the ages of 18 to 25. So some of us will cast our minds back a long, long way. Others will be going, oh, there, I'm almost there. So what are the endings, the confusions, and the beginnings for people aged 18 to 25? Well, there's the ending of adolescence, which also means the ending of dependence on parents, or at least we hope it does. It doesn't always. By 25, many people have also ended their initial period of study, although these days, gosh, you need sometimes multiple degrees and you go back and back and back. It's also a time of life when you're aged 18 to 25 when you're challenging a lot of things in life. And often you're also challenging your faith. So what I'd like to do is to give you a title for each of these stages. So you'll see on the screen, for 18 to 25-year-olds, we call this life stage the age of differentiation. So what that is about the age of differentiating yourself from the people around you. So individuals in this age group are trying to find out who they are, and if they are individuals, particularly in the church. So are they a spiritual clone? Do they only believe what they believe simply because that's what they have been told? Or have they begun to hammer it out and develop their own faith structure? You know, is the stuff that my parents told me, if that's where I got it from, is it for real? Or do I look for some other belief system for life? For me, when I was 19, I left New Zealand and moved to Australia to work in the computer industry. And I'd been very heavily involved in the Salvation Army when I was in New Zealand. But I sort of had a bit of enough of it, really. And I worked at territorial headquarters was my first job because they were putting computers in, and so I got hired to help do that. And so my first job was at Salvation Army headquarters, which is not always this may surprise you, it's not always the most easiest place to work. And so when I moved to Australia, I thought, I've done my dash with the army, and one of the thoughts in my mind was, I wonder who I actually am, you know? Like, I don't drink, and I don't smoke, and I don't sleep around, and I don't, all of these things. I had all this stuff that I sort of was, and I thought, I wonder if that really is me, or if that's just me because of where I was. And so when I went to Australia, I suppose one of my things was, let's find out whether I really am those people, that I think I am, whether I am that person, or whether this is just who I am because every time I tried to step out of that box, people would go to me, no, you don't do that. So anytime I might have thought, I'll go to that party, people go, you don't go to those sort of parties. And I go, I know I don't. So when I went to Australia, I guess there was no one there to tell me because no one knew me. So there was no one to go, you don't do that. So theoretically, I could do anything I liked. And what I found is I actually was that person. It did hold me up. It was who I was. But that was quite good. So this was the task for me, in that age group, to hammer it out for myself, to find out who I really was, rather than who everyone told me I was. And this is the question that we see in the Gospels, isn't it? It's really the common question that people said to Jesus. They would go, is this, from their own perspective, is this the Messiah? Is this the Christ? Or should I look for another one? That was the question that people were asking. So the basic theological question for the 18 to 25-year-old is, what shall I believe? That's what that age group is concerned with. Now the 18 to 25-year-old has 3 primary tasks. If you'd like to-do lists, these are the things on the to-do list. Finding a partner, finding an occupation, and developing a philosophy or a theology for life. So let's look at these. Now there are many in their age group who are not choosing to marry so young. I was 21 when I got married, and if my children said they wanted to get married at 21, I'd go, oh, are you really sure? But some do and some don't. So I mean about the ages sort of shifting. But some people are choosing to postpone, that type of thing until later, and to instead find a career and, marry and have family later on, say in their 30s. And then there are others who get married early on, and by the time they're 25, they start a family. There are also, of course, people who choose not to marry at all, which is something that the church actually needs to honour and not stigmatise in any way. So, and I told you he did that. That's awesome. Okay, in terms of finding an occupation, this is concerned with what will I do with my life? What will my work be? How will I make money so that I can live independently of my parents? And a big issue for young people today is, will I even find work? It's a hard thing. In terms of the third task on their to-do list, the development of a philosophy or a theology, this is about identifying the value system that is going to guide our life, And this is really, this is so important because that value system will set the parameters for our behaviour. So for me, when I was in Australia and I didn't have anyone, putting those walls up for me, I needed to think about what walls I wanted, what was going to be permissible for me. It says in Corinthians, I can do anything, but not everything is good for me. Everything is permissible, but not everything is good. So your value system is really, really important. And it's also important to us in the church that we support young people to explore and own the Christian faith themselves, to express their doubts, to express their questions, to go, I don't agree with this, but I do agree with this. We can't be threatened by that stuff. I can't overemphasise how important this first major transition is, because if we don't explore these questions at this stage of life, if we don't resolve them adequately, we will need to revisit them in later life. If we don't answer the who am I question when we're sort of 18 to 25, we are going to have to do it again. And at that point, the ripple effects can be far more complex and far more far-reaching, because We may be married, we may have kids, we may have a mortgage, we may have lots of stuff. So the earlier we can resolve these, who am I, what value system do I base my life on questions, the better for us in the long run. Okay, the next stage of life is very narrow, the ages of 30 to 32. Is there anyone here who's aged 30 to 32? I like that. Good on you. I love it. The title for this age is somewhat pessimistic, and it's the years of boredom. So the reason, as I say, you might be experiencing that at a different stage of life. The rationale for this is by the time we're aged 30 to 32, some aspects of life have become routine. We probably have an education, we have a place to live, we have a car, we maybe have a partner, we could even have 1 or 2 children, and there's exceptions, and I'm not wanting to say those are the worthwhile goals in life, okay? Not everyone gets married, and for various reasons not everyone has children. They may choose not to have children, or they may not be able to have children. But in general terms, these are the types of things that are established in our life by around this stage. So the years of boredom, and I don't want to depress the younger people, whenever they fall, is when life gets routine, okay? We're getting up at the same time every morning, we're getting the kids to school, we've got kids, we're getting ourselves to work, we're coming home, we're getting dinner sorted, we're helping with homework, we're watching TV, we're going to bed to get up in the morning and do it all again. So life can become somewhat monotonous, somewhat same old stuff. So the question of the 30 to 32-year-old is this all there is? You know? Do I have to live my 30th year over and over and over and over again? Okay? Because how boring would that be? The treadmill phenomenon kicks in, and we begin to discover that being an adult is actually quite hard work. Sometimes, often, it is. No, we've got responsibilities. Oh. Okay, so one of the questions that starts to get asked by this age group within the church is, tell me what the meaning, the real meaning of life is. Now, if you're familiar with Willow Creek Community Church, you know that they have quite a high amount of evangelistic success with people in this age of life and to their early 40s. And that's because they understand that people are asking the, is this all there is to life? question. And they're ready to say to people, well, no. Because there's not just you, there's also God. So this could be all there is to your life, if that's all you want, but it depends on you. You may have the things, but now what will you actually do with your life? You know, what will you invest in? So the basic theological question for this age group, the God question that people are asking is, what will I do that has meaning in my life? The next stage is around 40 to 55, although this one is pushing out later, you know. This is the humdinger transition of them all. This is the midlife crisis. Now, the years of the midlife crisis are also called the recapitulation years. What gets recapitulated are those things from that very first early adulthood stage. Finding a partner, finding a job, and establishing our life foundation, our faith foundation. If these, either we didn't work them out well the first time around, or they're no longer fulfilling or challenging or happy enough, then we will rework them in this stage. Okay, so for example, in midlife, many people, you know, relationships can end and new relationships might start. This is where the highest divorce rate is. Occupation, around 25%, probably more really, change what they do in this stage of life. Well, our philosophy, our theology for life can also change greatly here. And one of the reasons of that is that we actually start to be a bit more aware of our own mortality. So many times, by the age of 40 to 55, some of our peer group are facing major health issues. And some of them are even dying. A friend is jogging and, you know, and drops dead, and he was in pretty good shape, you know. Another friend gets cancer and it doesn't have a good outcome. So when we were, you know, in our 20s and, you know, early 30s, we couldn't really imagine an end to our life. But in our 40s and our early 50s, we start to see death on the horizon. You know, start to think about that a little bit. Interestingly, many of the skills that we used in the first half of our life that got us what we needed stop working so well in middle life. This is quite interesting. So, for example, we may have found that we could manipulate people to get what we wanted in the first part of life. You know, we got sympathy, we got gifts, we got affection, we got the front row seat. You know, but when you come out through, guys, when you come out through midlife and out the other side, it stops working for us. Some of that stuff, and people might get angry and impatient, and they might even reject us. Because they sort of go, well, if you want to be like that, that's fine, but I don't have to hang around with you, you know. So we either need to give up that type of behaviour that used to work, or we need to learn to live with rejection, frankly. One writer has suggested that men who had been pretty macho in the first part of life might need to let go of that, and it might be worn out anyway. And they may need to become more caring and intuitive in the second half of their life, more feminine. There you go, I don't want to use labels, but so I'll go like that. Women, on the other hand, in the second half of life, may need to be less feminine. We might need to be more intentional and a little bit more assertive, not aggressive, but assertive, about what we want in life, and not be so passive. You know, so that sort of behaviour as a woman, that does serve you quite well in the first half of your life. If you're sweet and nice and, you know that can work quite well. But if you keep doing that in the second half of life, you're going to be walked over, you know. It's not. Let it go. So in midlife, the roles begin to shift, and we begin to mature into a different person, and hopefully a better person. So this is how a midlife crisis might sound. I used to be employed. Now I'm told I'm too old. I used to be a wife or a husband, and now my marriage is over. I used to be a mum. Now my children are gone. Well, they don't seem to need me the same anyway. I used to be a daughter. Now both my parents are gone. So the question asked in midlife echoes that early question of the early adult years, who am I? Now, as a church, we need to be aware that faith can go into a serious spasm for people in midlife. I had a belief system that said this, but it doesn't seem to work so well for me anymore. And we need to realise that it's often difficult for people to engage in church life when they're having to rework stuff in other areas of their lives. Because I think people still think, so wrong, you know, church is a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints, they say. You know, people still have that idea that church is this place you come to when you've got it all together. Do you find that people just go, I can't go to church because I'm doing this and God wouldn't like it and people will judge me. You know, church it has to be a place where you can bring all your stuff and not feel like you have to have it all together and have no questions. So, but people do feel that, you know, we do. We go, I better not go, crap, you know. So we need to realise that we have an opportunity to hang in with people who are feeling that. We've felt that.
Yes.
You know, maybe we came anyway, or maybe we put on a mask and came anyway. Other people are feeling that. You know, when people stop coming to church, we go, oh gosh, you know, because we're scared about it, we take it personally. Instead of going, I wonder what's going on for them. I better go and find out, you know. So it comes about us instead of about them. So the question for us as a church is, are we prepared to stay with people despite the pain and confusion of their transitions? And I mean, what would Jesus have us do? You know, he would have us hang out with people. Any transition can take us into a desert time when we experience a dryness of faith. I've been there, I'm sure people here have been there. When we don't know if we believe the same way anymore. And it's okay, because it's a transition, you know, and transitions are messy. It's like when you bring a ship into dry dock and they chip off all the barnacles. Have you ever seen that? They put them up high, they chip off all the barnacles and it's picked up that are slowing it down. That's what's going on for us when we're in transition. It can be scary, you know, it can be messy and scary, and we don't like, you know, in the West we don't like messy anyway. The Bible is full of stories of people being stripped down, people going into dry dock and having the barnacles chipped off. Two main ones, Job, you know, stripped down to, you know, almost nothing. But the ultimate story is Jesus. Stripped back to absolutely nothing, you know. He didn't even own a cloak on his back. He was put on a cross. They buried him in a borrowed tomb. His family couldn't do anything. His disciples were just sort of standing around useless. And Jesus is on the cross and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? How much more stripped down can you get? But out of that nothing came resurrection. And the more we are reluctant to get stripped down and become vulnerable, and I hate being vulnerable, I just hate it, I'm just so bad at it. But the more we're reluctant to do that, to reach out to others, to reach out to God, even in our doubts and messiness and sin and confusion, the less resurrection we get. As long as we keep playing the church games about having it all together, we're just staying in the tomb, aren't we? We're just not giving a chance. So out of nothing comes resurrection. In the desert times of life, which we all hate, we don't go, oh yay, I'm going to do this, awesome. We don't run to them. But in the desert times of life, we could actually celebrate those times because it's a great opportunity to rework our belief in God, to have a more grown-up, more mature, more resilient faith. And coming to that is painful, but it's pain with a purpose, really is. Every pain in life has something to teach us if we're open to it, and we'd be wise to be open to it. So, for instance, we learn to trust God even when we don't feel that we can trust God. I've been in those situations. I don't trust God, but I've learned to trust God. And if we avoid them, as some of us do, we can't move through to a new understanding of God and ourselves. We won't have our wounds exposed, and then we can't have them healed, We're just staying at home going, I could go to the doctor, I won't go to the doctor. It'll cost money, or he might tell me something uncomfortable, I'll stay home and be sick. Get to the doctor. The next stages of life, ages 50 to 55, is another one that can vary hugely where it sits. And this is called the years of the empty nest. And I understand from people that it can be a marvellous time. But I have to say, I feel some grief and fear about this one, because it's sort of lurking on the horizon for me, I guess. And I know that I'm going to have to lean into that. I'm going to have to do some work here. So this stage is when individuals deal with changes in the family structure of their home. And they also look at that question, what will I do in retirement? Even though, as I say, that's being pushed off. So a key question in this stage of life is, what can I do around which I will be remembered? To come to grips with the fact that we're actually only here for a while and then we're gone is very important. So the key theological question being asked here is, what can I do that is meaningful to people and society, that is productive and helpful? It's not just about me. Some people do just choose to make it about them, but this is an opportunity to think about more than us. So again, this can be a really productive stage of life. Faith can be a huge anchor, a huge strength to us, and it can be a real motivator to look beyond ourselves. The next stage is ages 65 and up, and this is called the years of letting go. What are the endings and the beginnings in this stage? Well, employment and retirement are major life transitions, and they can be accompanied by some confusion ahead of those eventual new beginnings. So if our identity and our meaning is totally wrapped up in our work, and then we lose our work, what happens? Yeah. We've sort of lost our identity, haven't we? We've lost who we are. So in these years, the question that people are asking is, in what areas other than work can I invest myself? This is where church can be so important to people's quality of life. What meaningful work, and I don't mean like grunt work, meaningless work, although that's helpful, but what meaningful work can the church give to people in this stage of life when people have huge life wisdom, so that they can have a buffer when this letting go transition occurs. So if you can be letting go from work at the same point in time as you're already contributing hugely at church, that can be really, really helpful for people. Can help you to move forward with meaning and substance. Now the final stage we're going to look at is the ages of 70 and up. And as I say, these ages are shifting, but this is just generally. Let's face it, these are the years of approaching death, people. Who else dies when you're 70 years old, or in that sort of age group, and you're over there? It's your spouse, if you're married. And the single most traumatic event of life is the loss of your spouse particularly if you've had a strong relationship, if you've had a meaningful, productive marriage, and especially if you've lived together your whole life. We see those stories, don't we, on the news where one partner will go and then the other partner will go sometimes within days or weeks, you know, and it happens. So another painful event from this stage can be selling the family home, which takes enormous emotional energy. Every possible emotion kicks in when people have to sell the family home to downsize or to move into care. And often that second event comes very soon after the death or disability of a spouse. So I look at my parents, my dad had a stroke, major stroke, and mum cared for him at home for a while, and then eventually he had to go into care and we had to help her downsize a decades of hoarding, you know, and so she could go something smaller. And it's a lovely little place, but it's still not big enough. You know, she'd still like to have more stuff, you know, the stuff on the roof. You know, so we need to be sensitive as a church to this stage for people. We need to be ready to visit. We need to be ready to support them through their changes. And we need to realise that some people in this stage of life will become less frequent at church. They may even stop attending altogether. And that doesn't mean that they've given up on church, but be aware, as it is, and for anybody who drops out of church, they are wondering if church has given up on them. You know, if a person is willing to enter into the agony, the pain and the joy that comes from each of these stages in life, not avoiding them because we're tempted to do that, you know, but actually working through them, then by the time he or she reaches their 70s or 80s, they're likely to have developed a rich and satisfying faith that's accompanied by wisdom, compassion, gentleness and humility. And we can probably think of those people, you know, we can think of those people. If we haven't been willing to do the work, we can become somewhat dysfunctional as Christians and as human beings, frankly. We may become bitter and brittle and critical. We may feel life has cheated us. We may feel exceptionally frightened at the prospect of death. You see, every one of those transitions gives us an opportunity to learn how to understand how to go through the next one. And God gives us 6 such opportunities to learn through the typical lifespan. And so it's like God saying, shall we try again? You know, God's our friend. He's going, let's have another go, shall we? Let's see how we go. And so we work through the next challenge in life, for good and for bad. Now, in every stage of life, in every transitional, messy period of life, friends are crucial. You know, transitions are so hard when we do them on our own. Doesn't matter how young or how old we are. If we're doing it on our own, it's hard work. They will always be lonely at some point because no one else can go into your desert but you. You know, so there are going to be some lonely times. But others can watch and they can be aware and sensitive and they can help. And this is one of the greatest advantages to staying in a church long term, you know, as opposed to saying, oh yeah, this is good for me now because my kids are this age, but you know, when they're not this age I might find another church. This is the real reason, you know, I'm not saying let's grow the Salvation Army, but this is the pragmatic reason for committing to a church long term. Because you have those friends and those connections that will hold you, and you can also be that for others. Whereas if you're new, it's really hard, so hard to break in and get on. So, you know, stay long term. You will have friends who hold you up. What I'd like us to do now is just a little bit more neighbourhood watch. So I'd like you to turn to your neighbour and say, what life season, don't worry if you can't remember the ages too much, what life season are you in now? And be honest with them, just say what would help you the most at this point in your life. Okay, so yeah, turn to the person next to you, just do that, and then I'll come back in a couple of minutes. I'd encourage you to keep those conversations going. You know, after we leave here this morning, just keep having those chats with people, find out where people are at and what would be helpful. Okay, of course, the final transition in life, the 7th one, is death. Did God help you through the other transitions in your life? Have you felt His nearness? Have you drawn on His wisdom, His grace and His strength? And if the answer is yes, then at that final transition, you can say, okay, God, I'll go through this one with you too. Here we go. And that's what I mean. If we can just get all of that stuff done earlier, I don't want it to sound like a to-do list, because it's actually not about doing, it's about being. But if we can be with God through those hard times of life, and at the end, that final one, we can let go and we can let God. I opened this morning with a reading called Chrysalis, which is by a man called Jean Rooney, and this is his closing to that story. You can remember the beginning one, this is the end, or the beginning. She continued to twist and turn in her discomfort. Her terminal illness had confined her for some time. The pain came in waves, one after another, after another. She resisted death and fought for life, gamely calling on her last reserves of courage and strength until they were all gone. Then she fell back exhausted and relaxed. At her advanced age, she could no longer summon the strength to continue the struggle. And so, as she relaxed her hold on life, it relaxed its hold on her. Suddenly, she was free. She experienced a sense of drifting up and away, as if she was spreading the wings of her spirit to be warmed by the sun. Far beneath her, she could see her loved ones gather around the physical cocoon that had been her earthly home for a while, but which would never again impose its limits and bounds on her potential. What she had been, she would never be again, and what she would now be was yet to be discovered. I pray that for you will know God to be your friend, your companion, and that you will trust Him with the hard times and the good times of your life.
Yes.
That you will lean into the pain and discomfort of those transitions, but not lose sight of the fact that there is a beginning coming after it. This is not the end. Psalm 23, through the valley, in all of the stages of our lives. Let's pray, and then Lee's going to come and lead us in a song. God, we thank you that you are with us in life. This is the amazing thing of Christian faith. We are not on our own. We are not following some precepts. We have you with us by your Spirit, your presence. So often we take that for granted, and it's just miraculous. So God, in whatever stage of life we're at now, we just ask that we would be keenly aware of your presence. That whatever questions and doubts and fears and obstacles we may have, we would be willing to give them into your keeping and trust you and know that you will not leave us to face any of this alone. Lord, give us great sensitivity to the needs of others.
Yes.
Because we know that people don't always say what's on their hearts, whatever's on their minds. They don't just always share the fears that are with them. So Lord, give us sensitivity. Help us to actually ask the hard questions for people. Give us the words to say. Help us just to shut up and listen. Help us just to be there by our presence and to be willing to be uncomfortable if it means helping others. Lord, thank you for the church. Thank you for this place that is our home.
Thank you.
Thank you for our friends. Help us to be friends to others.
Yes.
Lord, as we give, we receive. And we thank you that you give to us so freely.
Yes.
Lord, thank you for your grace and your mercy and your love. Amen.
Amen. Amen.